Is there life beyond betrayal?
We're going to talk about that today. First off, I wanted to read a iTunes review. Thank you for taking the time to pop over there and do that. This is called Roadmap for the Hardest Time. I learned a month ago that my husband of 11 years has been dealing with an addiction for our entire marriage. I'm devastated, and in my grief, I've been struggling to find a roadmap for how to put one foot in front of the other. This podcast and related website have been truly life-saving, a much-needed light in the darkness of this mess. I have felt like I am drowning, but this resource has helped me find some type of footing. I'm so thankful for all of you. Thank you for your honesty, empathy, and insight. I have no idea what the future holds for my marriage, but I'm determined to learn from this heartbreak, even if it's just for me. Just beautiful. And I feel the heartbreak, I feel the sorrow, but I also feel a lot of strength from this gal who's stepping into her own power of healing and shifting for her own self. So thank you for sharing that.
Okay, Ashlynn, I do love that review as well, and it really speaks to what we talk about a lot, which is we believe so strongly in the power to heal, and on an individual level as well as a couple you can heal, and you know we know that men aren't the only betrayers and women aren't the only betrayed. And I read a review today that we have, and it was a good review, but I think they gave us 4 stars or something, and they said it kind of turns me off that you kind of talk about things in that way. And I just want to be clear that one, Ashlynn and Coby's situation is where the man was the betrayer and Ashlynn was the betrayed. Also, most of our audience is that way. And so the reason why we talk about it that way mostly is because that's who's listening. But I do want to acknowledge that men have been betrayed. And if you're listening as the betrayed and you're the man, then you know, we hope that our content is helpful for you as well. So, but Ashlynn, I want to kind of shut up today some, and that's hard for me to do. And I just want to hear from you and your story of healing, and just kind of ask you some questions along the way, and just kind of learn from the process that you've been through. So, you know, you say things like, man, I just wish there was these resources out there for us when we started. Yet somehow, some way, you worked your way beyond betrayal and you made it happen. And I'm not saying you've arrived and, you know, but you still have stuff that you're working through. But despite the resources and the things that were out there when you started, you went through a process and you found some really good healing. Let's back up just a little bit.
Okay.
Start kind of at square zero, when times were just hard. And then what was some of the first things that really started to help you move forward and move beyond betrayal?
You know, it's interesting, Brannon, because as you put me back there, and it's a long time ago for me, and I don't have the memory that Coby has, but I'm going to try. So when I think of zero, I think of when I went, when I found a friend who shared her own story, when I went to my first betrayal trauma convention. I mean, I don't even know what you called it. But I went to this place surrounded by women, terrified I would see someone I knew. But it was my first step into naming and getting a little educated. And the way I look at that now, because there aren't these conferences so much happening as much anymore, is our podcast. Our podcast is basically ground zero for a lot of people of like, I'm going to step into putting some labels or like naming what's going on, what I'm feeling.
So getting educated.
Yeah.
Gaining some understanding.
Yeah. And trying to make sense of what just feels senseless. Not feels, it is. It's painful. Trying to find some ground of like that review, you know, how do I find this path to put one foot in front of the other? I was definitely looking for that.
Right.
And that's what we try to give uh, each week, but also through our programs. Absolutely.
Right. So to find a little bit of a pathway forward, to know that there's some hope or some healing that can take place, I think that's so important. Um, and so, were you able to find that, Ashlyn, or was that hard to find for you?
It was a little bit harder then than it is now. I think
Mm-hmm.
the great thing is people are more open now, right? We're feeling a lot more validation by more education and more resources for us. But that was really the beginnings for me. Is okay. Here's all these things. I'm trying to grab them from all over the place, right? I'm seeking validation over here from strangers I don't know, and then I'm getting educated over here by some therapist I don't know, but it sounds good and it makes sense. And so being able to, yeah, had I wish we could have it all in one little spot and nugget and say, here's your education, here's your validation, and here's some ground for you to start and to get to work.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
ideally, that's what I wanted.
Right.
It was a little bit messier than that.
Right. Okay. So once you gain some ground, like you get some education, you kind of, even if the pathway is not quite so clear, then what happened, Ashlyn, for you?
I stepped into the idea that, I mean, it took me a while, that I have a role in this, that I have a role in my own healing, that Coby couldn't, by Coby changing or Coby not changing. Yes, it could affect how I felt, but my own healing was my responsibility.
Okay, Ashlyn. So I got to say, this part's really tricky for Betrayal, because what you're saying is absolutely true. Is that, you know, I like to say this, like, I believe in the women that I work with, and I believe that they have the strength and the power to move beyond betrayal. I believe that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I don't do is drive home, you have to stay stuck. But there's this really important part, which is, you know what, before I'm going to push you out of that and say, like, you better get beyond that, there needs to be a little bit of validation in that pain. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
you're feeling pain, and it's okay that you're feeling pain. And that pain is very, very real. And what you just said is true, right, Ashlyn? That
Yeah.
you have the power to heal, and you actually have a part in the healing, for your relationship as well.
Oh, for sure. And I think it reminds me of like simple little tasks that I was given to go and, write a letter of getting out all of that grief, and to if I couldn't get validation from my spouse or validation from my friends who were like, what are you even talking about? I'm not going to share all the details with them. I could give it to myself. I could really put a name to all of these things I was feeling and release it. Um,
Yeah. You
yeah.
you have it within you to process that pain, regardless of what Coby does with his recovery. And it's nice if Coby is there as an ally
Hmm.
and a teammate and helpful, but he doesn't need to be there as that in order for you to do that, and or order for you to move forward.
For
So
sure. And we both know that because we've seen women who have stepped into this path, and their story does not look like Coby and my story of doing it, simultaneously, but they still find that empowering and ability to move beyond betrayal, because they're focusing and staying in their own lane.
okay, Ashlyn, what you're saying is awesome, but dang it, now that
But
now that
no.
dang it, now that means there's some accountability.
Yeah.
There's some accountability in terms of choosing what you want in your life and having the power to create that. And when you know that, hey, I have options here, I can move forward, you're now accountable for moving forward. And I'm not saying that your partner has nothing to do with what you're going through, anything like that, but you do have the accountability to move forward and to maintain that power.
Yeah.
Okay, so once you realize that, Ashlyn, then what do you do? Like, what's the work that you start to get into, to really self-reflect and do that work?
Yeah. Okay. I have to just pause here because you're right in slowing me down and saying it, but it's not that easy, right? To step into I have a part, I get to have a choice in this. I have a role in this. Because if you've listened to us long enough, you know that I definitely did not subscribe to that belief for like at least 2 decades, where I was just like, Coby, go and fix this. And if you can't
Coby
fix it,
sucks. He's the
yes.
problem, and go fix it.
Yes. And it was just like, we're not going to talk about this until it's fixed. And when it's fixed, then we're still not going to talk about it because it ruined my life.
Yeah.
That wasn't a great place for me to be in, but I couldn't see any other way
And
until
if
I
you,
could.
and if you are there, that's totally normal.
Yes.
If
It
it
was
feels,
part of our process.
yeah, it feels like your partner is causing all this pain and you're waiting for them to change so that you're not in pain anymore.
Yes. Which I think is human, right? We see a problem and we're like, now I can point so many fingers and say like, that's the problem. So solution is like, get rid of that thing. Right.
Yes.
It's just not that easy. And we don't have control over other people's behaviors
Right.
as much as we want to. And
Right.
so it's really just up to us. So I want to share a quick little story, which you may have heard me share before, but I don't know if we've shared it here on the podcast. I know we did in our program, Shattered Trust to Thriving Intimacy. However, I want to share it here because this was something that really started to have me self-reflect and say, maybe I can step in and I do have the power to move through this, and not just move through it and like stay there, but to move beyond it. And it becomes part of my story rather than it's my story. This is who I am.
Right.
So the story is of, okay, if you've been to Colorado and the Rocky Mountains and you've gone, you know, Coby and I, we drove from Kansas to Colorado, and it's a crazy, you know, it's the plains of Kansas and then shooting up to those mountains of the Rockies. And it's actually very beautiful. But because it's so diverse in that area, you have cows and buffaloes together, which doesn't happen all the time. And they're very different animals, right? So they have storms coming in, and they most often come from those Rocky Mountains. And so when the cows, for instance, see a storm brewing in the mountains of the Rockies, they turn and say, oh my gosh, this hard thing's coming. I'm going to run away from the storm. So they're avoiding, I'm going to run away. And what happens is cows are slow, and cows, they get their time in the storm, in the messy, is longer than had they just either stayed in one place or moved towards the storm. Because they're trying to avoid it, it stays with them for a really long time. Whereas the opposite is a buffalo, and they see a storm coming and they turn and they look towards that storm and they move into it. Okay.
Yes.
And they're saying, hey, if I move into this storm, I'm not going to have to be in it as long. And they're not. They're big animals, but they can move through that storm. They're going opposite ways and it can move through them. So, I mean, you look at it like life. And I mean, you're not human if you don't try to dance around your problems and shove them under a rug or just not talk about them. That's being human. But I want to be a better human. And so for me to say, you know what, I'm going to step in, I'm going to be that freaking buffalo. I may not be running at full force, but I'm moving toward the storm. And for me, it was very powerful. I have little temporary tattoos that remind me when I need it to be the buffalo, to step into the hard, to that uncomfortable feeling of, oh my gosh, now I have to do my own grief work. Oh my gosh, now I have to feel all these really hard things. But I know from experience that once I do, it won't last as long.
Yes. Yeah, pain is mandatory in life. Suffering is optional. But the way out of the pain is to turn and go through it. And one of my favorite analogies with this, the buffalo analogy is way better. But if you get crapped on, and you can, I'll give you 2 examples. You get crapped on, you can suffocate in the crap because it's buried you, right? And so if you hunker down and you feel stuck in it, eventually you're going to suffocate in crap, which is not fun.
No.
If you turn your face up and you start pushing through it, which nobody wants to do with crap, it stinks. You get out of it, you get on top of it, and that crap turns into fertilizer, and it helps you grow and feel alive and move forward. And so pain is mandatory. We're all going to have it.
I
If
like that analogy too, because it's a little messy. 'Cause you're not
it's
saying it's still stinky, it's still dirty.
it's not fun and it's stinky, absolutely. But the beauty of it is that when you face the pain, then comes growth. And betrayal, I don't know if there's something more painful in life than betrayal. I'm sure there are some things, but it's up there. And so to face that, to deal with it, to be the buffalo with betrayal can be so scary and so hard. But you're here to say, Ashlynn, that it's absolutely possible, right?
Yeah. Hearing you say that reminds me this morning on one of my group calls, I have a gal who just started who's, just after finding out, my life is not what I thought it was. I had disclosure of all these things. And it's heavy right now for her. She's in the thick of it and she cannot see the hope, often throughout the day.
Right.
Maybe she has glimpses. But she's matched with a bunch of girls who've been working it for well over a year and who've been there, and they're saying, I promise, like what you feel today, you will not feel if you keep moving through it.
You're saying that if you're a buffalo, that storm eventually does pass and you see the sun again.
Yeah.
And life's not perfect. Another storm will come.
Mm-hmm.
But you do get to that warm place of light where the sun's there again. And it's absolutely possible. Or you can be a cow running and running and running. Right?
Yeah, right. Which we've all done.
Absolutely.
But we're asking you to get rid of that mentality, to really step into and say, you know what, I can do this. The strength that you see in others who've moved before you, you see the insight that Brannon has as the expert, you have that within you. You can remember and hold on to these skills and use them as you start to own and recognize your own patterns and step into that. So
okay, Ashlynn. So as you realize that you can work through hard things, as you realize that there is hope, as you realize that you have power to create healing and change inside of you, regardless of your partner, once you get to that kind of resilient place of, and it's not just understanding in your mind, but it's understanding in your soul, in your heart, like that that's possible. Then what? Then what can happen in your recovery?
I saw this in myself. I see it a lot of times in women too, but it's like I started on that ramp and I'm going up and I find my feet, I find some hope, and I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. But as I start to do it, I'm doing really hard things. And I kind of either go down like a roller coaster, like, oh, I got to that peak and oh my gosh, I'm starting to really feel. And for me specific, you guys, I don't share a ton of my emotion here, but I am like 1000% different than I used to be. I had no idea what I was feeling most of the time. I just knew I was mad or I was happy. There was no in between. And so for me, when I started to really work on those things, I started to feel, and it was really painful. It almost felt like I was going backwards. Because for the first time, I wasn't blaming. For the first time, I wasn't ignoring. I was actually saying, this is part of me, and accepting that it is our story, accepting that I have a role in finding my own healing and stepping into that.
Yep.
So
But it's back to that same analogy. It's stepping into the storm is not comfortable.
Yeah.
And sometimes it does feel like it gets a lot harder before it gets better. And there's a lot of steps into the dark. But as you do that, then eventually you start to see glimpses of the light. And it's like cutting out an infection. It's easier to leave an infection in there to kill you than it is to dig it out. And when you dig it out, it hurts and it's scary and it's hard, but it's going to save your life.
Yeah.
So we could use so many analogies. I could keep going. The fish hook analogy or whatever it is. But yeah, once you do it once or twice, it doesn't take away that it's painful to do it again. But what it does do is give you that wisdom that you can survive it and that you can work through it. And you start to feel so much more light in your life.
Mhm.
So, okay, Ashlynn, any last words for getting beyond betrayal?
I think just being able to recognize, one, you're not alone. If you're feeling, I don't have the strength to do that, or I don't have, we're all in these different seasons of life, whether you're a young mom, you're a grandma, wherever you're at, you're dating, I don't know, in a relationship, out of a relationship, the ability to step into what feels like 1,000 times harder, I promise is not. It is so much harder to stay stuck, so much harder to stay in the pain and to just ignore. I know because I did it. I did it for almost 15 years where I just said, you know what? My marriage is just hard, and I'm just going
Mm-hmm.
to, that was
Mm-hmm.
my acceptance and my brave face, but it wasn't.
Right.
It was me totally ignoring and not giving even my children the best part of me.
You don't have to resign to the outcomes you're getting in your life. You
Right.
can get new outcomes.
Yes. And so I want you all to, if you're listening to this, to show up as your best self, whatever function all the different functions that you show up in every day. There's going to probably be a season, and maybe you're in it right now, where if you're a young mom and maybe your kids are watching way more TV than you like, or maybe you're going to Chick-fil-A every day for dinner, and that's a season. And these things don't last forever. The storm does come and go, but the more we can step into our own courage and to really do our own work, the quicker we can move through that.
But like the buffalo, Ashton, I know that the seasons come and they don't last forever. But I do know that you do have the ability to work through things, if you choose into that. And really, that's why we've laid out this 5-step process. And when we say process, we're talking about a legit process of healing. And what that means is you work through things, you push through
Mm-hmm.
things. It's not just hard. Some of it's fun, some of it's interesting, and some of it's working through pain. But what it is it's giving you the tools to be able to get beyond that betrayal, owning you, that betrayal dominating your world, and realizing this is an experience that you've had in your life that you can ultimately turn into fertilizer. And this is how you do it. And Ashlynn, when we've talked about when we put this together, I really do think it was divinely
Mm-hmm.
inspired, to help push people through that storm. Um, and so I'm excited to be able to have it out there and have people start working through it.
I am too. As we put together the worksheets, we'd create the content and then, okay, let's have them do these worksheets. And this is their homework that we want them to
Mm-hmm.
do. These were things I did, Brannon. These are things you give to your clients,
Yes.
except the difference is I paid
Yeah,
a lot more to go and do those assignments. Your
absolutely.
clients pay a lot more to do those assignments. And we're
Yep.
giving it to you kind of wrapped up in a box with a bow and saying, take your own time. But
Yep.
here it is.
Yep. And it's all laid out there. So
Yeah.
go check it out. Go get it. It does work. And be the buffalo
Yep.
all the way.
Yes. Head over to beyond-enough.com/beyond betrayal. And you're going to find our Beyond Betrayal program. It is focused towards women, because that's my own story. And we know, that's maybe not your story, but if you're more of the guy in the betrayed story, you might want to head over to our other program, which is Shattered Trust to Thriving Intimacy, which does have both sides of it, and more working it towards a couple. This Beyond Betrayal program is really focusing on a growth mindset. It's the skills you're going to use for the rest of your life.
And it
It's
is for women.
Yes.
Just to be clear, it's for women who have been betrayed, and we help you process through that.
Yes. And if you haven't caught our company name, Beyond Enough, that's where it all came from, was the ability for me to really, truly believe that I wasn't just enough, that I struggled for so long to believe I was even enough, but I'm beyond enough. And all of you are as well. And so that's what, all of this that we do is to really help you get to that belief and to live it. And that's what we want for you. So grab the program this first week. It is launch week, which means you're going to get your best price during this week. Head over to the website.
Yeah, get it now. So we'll see you
All right.
guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.